Hello and welcome to You Asked For It. I am your host, Ann Page. I want to thank Sweet Dreams Furniture in Brunswick for this beautiful set of outdoor furniture. They have a huge selection. They've been voted the #1 furniture in the Mid-Coast region for the last 13 years. For the last 4 years, the #1 designers. I love Sweet Dreams Furniture. I own their furniture and I love it. I want to thank the House of Logan for this beautiful black dress and my lovely jewelry. I think this is the most scrumptious black dress I've ever worn. And I want to thank Bath Hair Incorporated for my haircut. Thank you, Heidi. I love my haircut. Thank you so much. You know, you asked for talent in the Mid-Coast area, and today I have an extraordinary talent as my guest, Dr. Jeff Grosser. Hello, Jeff. Thank you for being with me today.
Hi, Ann. Thank you for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Thank you. You know, Jeff is a multi-talented musician as well as a dentist. He's from the New York City area originally, and he's become a resident of Wiscasset in the Mid-Coast area since 1989. I love Jeff's story, and I'm going to ask him some questions about it. Now, when you were a young boy in New York, you had a desire to study music, you told me, and you initially wanted to study piano, but their apartment was too small for a piano, so he ended up with what?
I wound up accepting the offer from my parents to take accordion lessons.
Accordion,
Yeah.
Okay. And at that time, accordion was very popular in the United States. There were no electric pianos, and that was similar, I would imagine, to a piano.
Well, it was probably the closest it was going to get, and it fit in the apartment.
Great. And so how old were you when you started studying accordion?
I think it was probably around 12 years old.
Mm-hmm. And who was your teacher at that time?
Well, I had a first teacher. I remember him as Joe. And he worked with me for a year and a half, and I worked through the entire accordion course. And he told my mother, you've got to find another instructor for him because he knows more than I do now. Whether that was true or not, I don't know. But my mother found a fellow by the name of Cleon Rapaticus, a Greek instructor who was not too far from where we lived, but was the mentor for many, many musicians in the city of New York.
And what did Cleon recommend that your parents do with you?
Well, there were a few things. It depended upon how I behaved at the lesson on a particular day. But he always felt that there was the possibility that I could do music as a career. But at the same time of wanting to become a musician, I always wanted to be in the medical field, so I had that dichotomy of desires. And it panned out real well in my lifetime that becoming a dentist, I was able to continue my music and be a musician as well.
And did he also recommend that your parents put you in a special program at Juilliard?
Oh, at Juilliard, yes.
Yes.
He was instrumental in getting me in a special early program at Juilliard, and he was a heck of an instructor, a heck of a mentor. I look back at those days, I am so pleased I don't have to work that hard anymore at music.
How many hours a day did you practice at that age?
Oh gosh, at that age, probably as many as 4, sometimes 5.
Wow. You know, it's really hard for artists to talk about themselves, so I'm going to tell you that Dr. Grosser did a solo performance at Carnegie Hall. And how old were you at that time?
Believe it or not, it was about 14 or 15 years old.
Amazing. At Carnegie Hall, a solo performance at that age. And you know, as his career evolved, he became involved with a very famous talent agent. Who was that, Dr. Grosser?
Well, I'm sure you're talking about Ed Sullivan.
Absolutely.
The Ed Sullivan.
The Ed Sullivan. Tell us about him. What was he like and what happened?
Well, Ed was an absolute gentleman. He cared about people, and he took me on at a young age. I was probably, again, 16 years old or so, and I had the opportunity of working his birthday parties, which he celebrated at Sloan Kettering every year. And then he decided that he wanted me to work in the pit orchestra. Being very young, he contracted me a little differently than the musicians who were regulars on his television show. But he always looked out for my school, and he did agent work for me from that time until he passed away when I was a junior in dental school.
You know, I did not know this until the other day when I met with you and we had a conversation, but Ed Sullivan's show was really a segue into his business as a talent agent. And he booked musicians and sent them all over the country. So you were a very young musician, and he was sending you out on jobs to Las Vegas and all over.
Oh, all over the place. It was wonderful. Yeah, I got to see the country behind my instruments.
That's marvelous.
really
At
did.
that age, what an education.
And a real treat, because I had the opportunity of working with some really great performers, some real famous performers. And as much as it was a treat, if you had a bad job, that was okay too, because you know you wouldn't have been working with them the following weekend. So that double-edged sword.
So give us a little insight into some of those famous people that you worked with along the way.
Well, probably the one who became the closest of the friends that I met through him was Sammy Davis. And Sammy would, when he'd visit New York, pick up the phone when he was free and able to, and we'd meet down at his favorite bar in Wall Street to have a cocktail or a few. And at one point, I had a young secretary who I had hired about 2 weeks before, and she answered the phone, came rushing in and said, "Doc, there's somebody on the phone that says they're Sammy Davis, and what should I do?" I said, "Have him hold. I'll be there as soon as I can." And she did. And I went, spoke to him. We made the arrangements to meet down there on Wall Street at 7 o'clock that evening. And when I hung up, she said, "That was Sammy Davis Jr., the real Sammy Davis." I said, "Well, yes, it was." And I said, "If you'd like to meet him, you're welcome to come with me." And she got all excited, and she said, "Oh, darn, I have a date with my fiancé tonight." So I said, "Well, he can come too." And she said, "Oh, no, if I'm going to meet Sammy Davis, I don't want my fiancé around." So I said, "You decide what you want to do." And she decided to go see Sammy.
So would I. You know, what did he teach you about music? You must have learned something
Who is
from
that?
him. Sammy Davis Jr.
Actually, except for working with the orchestra with him once, we never talked music.
Amazing.
Oh, he talked about life-type things, some traveling, some of the foods that he enjoyed, some of the things that he did, and we'd swap stories, and I'd tell him, stories from the office, and we just had a good time. Two good friends having a drink that once every couple of months that he might be in New York and still free to spend some recreational time.
And Dr. Grosser interfaced with another favorite of mine. I have to admit to being a little jealous when he told me this story about Louis Armstrong.
Oh, Louis Armstrong. Louis Armstrong lived in Jackson Heights, and I was born and raised in Astoria, New York, so they're right next to each other. Jackson Heights is right by LaGuardia Airport, and there was a bar just outside the airport, and I had the opportunity of sitting a number of times with Louis. The sad thing was, though, I did not get to hear him perform live, which is a disappointment, but my own fault.
Well, there are certainly many recordings of him performing
yes.
live. And I think if people had a choice, they might even enjoy sitting down with him face to face. So you were very fortunate.
Yeah. And again, we talked a little bit about music and the things he was doing and the things I was doing. But the most had to do with things happening in New York City and things that were going on and the neighborhood and the airport and all that sort of stuff.
Well, you know, the other story that captivated me so much when I met with you the other day was that Dr. Grosser was in the pit orchestra of the Ed Sullivan Theater the night that the Beatles performed live, and he was just a young teenage boy. So you can share your experience of that with our audience.
My experience of that was sort of neutral. My background at that point, realizing the work I was doing with Cleon Rapaticus was basically classical music. I was playing an occasional jazz kind of thing. So it was probably 80% classical, 20% jazz, and rock and roll just to make a couple of dollars here or there, playing high school dances and stuff. But it was really just another gig. Drag your instrument there. And accordions traveling around on the subways of New York, they're heavy instruments. It was quite a jog lugging it up the 3 stories here today. But I look back, and it certainly is exciting to have been at the beginning of that history of the Beatles in America. So,
very few people can make that statement.
oh yeah, and as I told you, Ann, I got to meet them, but it was more in passing backstage, and it was an exciting night there. I mean, the screaming and the yelling, that I'll never forget.
It had to be.
But rock and roll was never my thing, and it was fine, but just another gig.
Yeah. Now, when I say Dr. Grosser is a multi-talented musician, that is a gross understatement. He plays so many instruments, not just well, but brilliantly. And today he has a banjo I see here. And, there's a little story about the banjo because there are different banjos. Which banjo is this?
Well, this is a plectrum banjo. It's a 4-string banjo rather than 5, which is the regular banjo, the type that's usually used for folk music or bluegrass, that sort of thing. But basically the neck is as long as those, but without the 5th string, and tuned a little bit differently than the bluegrass people would do. There's another type of banjo which is a little bit shorter. This has 22 frets. The tenor banjo, which has 17, 18, 19, or sometimes 20 frets, is a little shorter. That's tuned like a viola. That makes actually more mathematical sense than the plectrum. I use the old American tuning, which is probably the best sounding for solo kind of work. And banjos also exist in the size of ukuleles. So it's a family of instruments rather than a particular type. But this is a beautiful Vegavox built by the Vega Company in Boston, Massachusetts.
Beautiful.
And it's one that I enjoy playing.
Dr. Grosser is a member of a fretted instrument organization that's quite famous, and as a matter of fact, he happens to be the vice president. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh yes, well, the Fretted Instrument Guild of America, which is now working as All Frets, is an organization where all fretted instruments, banjos, guitars, dulcimers, mandolins, ukuleles, are all gathered together in a family of instrument, being the fretted instrument. And I was elected vice president last year. And they have a convention once a year, which is quite big, where all the different types of instruments come together, and they have concerts and workshops and really a grand time of music making over a weekend. The convention this year is sometime in July.
Where will it be held?
This year it's going to be in Branson, Missouri.
Great.
So
that'll be fun.
Yeah, well, it's the big party of the organization, but it's also the board of directors meeting, so it serves double duty.
So since you're here and you have your banjo, I wondered if you would grace us with performance.
Oh, I'd absolutely love to.
Okay, thank you. thank you, Dr. Grosser. That was just wonderful.
Oh, thank
you
you.
so much. Now, I did want to touch briefly on the fact that you travel all over the country to perform. And I wondered if you could tell us some of the venues that you do perform in throughout the country.
Oh, sure, of course. The banjo conventions around the country are a great deal of fun. They hold them in places such as the Boston area, Sacramento, California, Detroit, Morton, Illinois, Tucson, Arizona, and it's been, there were also conventions in Atlanta. There are conventions every January in Florida. So it really is a grand time to go and do workshops for those conventions, but also to play to that wide variety of audience.
And you have a band in Chicago, I believe, you performed with just recently.
I play with a band in Chicago where I play either piano, accordion, and banjo. They always have me do some sort of banjo specialty number because I'll travel with the banjo. I won't travel with an accordion. It's a little bit too heavy and dangerous to throw under the airplane.
And don't you play second violin with the
Augusta Symphony Orchestra?
With the Augusta Symphony. Yeah. What doesn't he do? It's amazing.
I can't blow a horn. I cannot blow a horn. I cannot get a B flat out of a B flat trumpet.
You know, we had this wonderful conversation the other day, and I asked you why you thought music was important for young people. And I wish that if you could articulate that again for me about what you said.
Music is something that you can take with you through your entire life. I was a good third baseman. I was a decent catcher, and I was a fairly fine outfielder. I can't play those positions anymore like I could back when I was young, but you can look at community orchestras and you can see people 90 years old, 80 years old, 70 years old, playing music which began sometime in their youth that carried through their entire life. And they're able to do that sometimes not only as well as they had been, many times better, but they are still able to do that. I don't think I could get out and run the bases today.
I hope this encourages people to realize how important the music and arts programs are in the public schools, because they seem to be the first programs that are cut. I hope that this interview encourages people to value the arts and, you know, looking at your life. And I don't think I've ever seen anyone who just lives and breathes music like Dr. Grosser. As a matter of fact, he told me he was accepted to both medical school and dental school. But could you tell us why you chose dental school over medical school?
It was music. And as I interviewed physicians and dentists, all the dentists said, become a dentist. You don't have all that emergency room stuff and schedulings and emergencies in quite the same fashion as the physicians do. And most of the physicians said become a dentist for the same reasons. And when I interviewed one fellow, he took me over to a closet, opened the door, said, "Do you know what that is?" I said, "Well, of course, it's a saxophone case." He said, "The last time I played that was when I was a senior in medical school." That was it. Dentist, here we go.
There we go, and there he went. And I have never heard an accordion played the way Dr. Grosser plays it. And I'm going to ask you if you would just grace us with one of your wonderful tunes today on the accordion.
Oh, I'd be more than happy to. Thank you.
Thank you. That was just wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I enjoyed it so much. You know, we have so much talent here in Maine and in the Mid-Coast area. You asked for talent and you're getting it. Thank you so much, Dr. Grosser, for being my guest today. We have enjoyed you tremendously. He is humble and he is gracious and he is multi-talented, and I'm just thrilled to have you here today. Thank you.
Well, I thank you, and again, encouragement of the arts, not just music, is an important thing. So if anything can be taken from the program today, I hope that that would be the biggest thing.
Thank you.